Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from the Mully & Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune covering the Bears. And it is free agency week. There's a flurry of news on the field pertaining to next year's team, off the field pertaining to the next home of the Bears. Jaylon Johnson had a lot of interesting things to say at Haugh on Monday. We're going to get to this. We're going to get to everything. And you can find us on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch us on 670 Scores YouTube page. I do have a fancy new background here, so you want to pay attention to the Mully & Haugh logo. And Dan, I would say this is as busy of a news day as we've had in a while.
Yeah, and it may be as busy of a news day as we have going forward for a very long time. I put out a tweet on Monday afternoon, David, saying that when we get to the end of 2024 and are starting to make our list of the top 40 Bears headlines of the year, there's going to be some big stories that don't make the cut. You talk about stadium and Hall of Fame and quarterback situation and coaching changes and roster overhaul. That's all before we even get to training camp and start doing the actual news of the season. And I feel like my head's already spinning. Today's a perfect example with a lot of those things colliding on the same day and leaving you and I to kind of get our bearings and get calibrated to try to sound it all out.
Well, let's get through it as soon as we can because there is a lot to get to. Let's stick with the people they've signed and added to the mix. We'll get to the stadium issue because it is seismic, I think, in terms of the development that happened on Monday morning. But let's start with free agency. The legal tampering period, an oxymoron if there ever was one, began Monday morning. And the Bears, I was surprised again, Dan. We talked about surprises in free agency. DeAndre Swift is not the guy that I thought they would end up with. It comes the day after they signed Kevin Byard, the safety, who's a two-time all-pro free safety to replace Eddie Jackson. These, to me, we'll talk about the money in a bit, but these, to me, are two very smart moves, low risk, high reward potential.
When you look big picture at this overall and you're seeing some of the things that the Bears have done here, you could say big splash wise, free agency 2024 has gotten them 4 starters. That goes back to the Montez Sweat extension of last November, Jaylon Johnson agreement, Kevin Byard, DeAndre Swift, and then if you want to throw on a lower splash level, the 5th round pick sent to Buffalo for Ryan Bates, you've got 5 guys now that should be starters for you when you go to the gate in week 1 of 2024. The Swift signing obviously is going to catch the headlines of Monday. Surprising to me only in the sense that I didn't really view running back as this huge priority for the Bears. You obviously know they have Jaylon Johnson in the building. You know how they feel about him. I think they obviously wanted to upgrade a little bit over Khalil Herbert in their backfield, but it seemed like there might have been other ways to do that. They made a calculated move here to go out and get a guy who's coming off a career season in Philadelphia, over 1,000 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns, 39 catches. He's got that versatility, obviously, that I think Shane Waldron values in his offense is going to make him a threat there. Your question here is, if you look a year beyond Miles Sanders cashing in on a big year in Philadelphia and going to Carolina and running into a wall and not really having anywhere near the same production, you wonder if DeAndre Swift can replicate what he did in Philadelphia here in Chicago. That's going to be up to Shane Waldron. It's going to be up to Matt Eberflus to put him in a position to make sure that this doesn't get looked back on as one of these signings that felt like a luxury signing that kind of blew up in your face. But I think there's a lot to like about the playmaking skills and what he can do versatility-wise.
3-year deal, 15 guaranteed. It's obviously a lot of money, but it's not overpaying for a position that no longer is a premium position. I don't believe, at least, because you're getting somebody who at 25 is just continuing the arc up, and the trajectory is a good one. He's coming from the Eagles. Absolutely. You wonder about, well, they have a great offensive line, so maybe anybody can look good behind that offensive line. At the same time, Dan, it's no secret to Bears fans that Swift, from these years with the Lions, dangerous. He's versatile. He can hurt you in a couple different ways. I like it. Now, full disclosure, we talked last pod. I wanted Saquon Barkley. I thought that would have been. Josh Jacobs was intriguing as an option, maybe too. DeAndre Swift, though, is not going to make me feel bad about the Bears missing out on those guys, because I do think that he fits because of this. He's 25, and you look at how young they are and the core pieces who are guys who are getting paid. This makes a lot of sense in the short term and for the long term.
To your point, as we sit here on Monday afternoon, obviously letting our audience know that this is a fluid day in the NFL and things are changing constantly. You've got Saquon Barkley going to Philadelphia to replace DeAndre Swift. You have Tony Pollard landing with the Tennessee Titans. You have Josh Jacobs up the road now in Wisconsin agreeing to a deal with the Green Bay Packers, and the Bears cashing in that running back market and they get DeAndre Swift. The thing that I like about it is that no matter who you have playing quarterback in 2024, the goal is to add protection and add weapons. And this is another effort to do so. It's a concerted effort to go out and get yourself a guy who's got proven production and is going to take some of the pressure and the weight off of your quarterback. So that is part of what this offseason is all about. The biggest headline that we're going to write this year is who they choose to play quarterback for them going forward. Beyond that, it's going to be about how do they support that guy and what do they do to produce some catalysts to help that success come along. This is an effort to do that. And now, obviously, I think everyone in the league is sort of in agreement that DJ Moore, top tier receiver, you better go get a group of receivers in that room by the time you report to OTAs that you look around and go, okay, there's more than just DJ Moore here. And now that's the next piece of the offensive playmaker puzzle.
The big free agent prize, Christian Wilkins, perhaps a three-technique guy who would have been the engine of any defense, signed for big money in Las Vegas. I don't think the Bears wanted to get into that bidding war. That's a lot of money, Dan, for a defensive tackle.
4 years, 110. Yeah.
Yeah. When you've got Montez Sweat already making that kind of money on the outside, and you've got your linebacker and you just retained Jaylon Johnson with some big money, I understand why the Bears stayed out of that one. You can draft and develop and maybe get somebody in the second wave. I also think it brings us to, I don't know if Kevin Byard qualifies as first wave or second wave or the pre-wave, if you will.
Pre-wave,
but that's a smart signing. Kevin Byard had a kind of a relatively down season, but relative to his previous success, one interception, but with the Titans and the Eagles, he still was physical. And I think that the Bears upgraded to that position in terms of physicality. He's not going to be an unwilling tackler, and I think that he'll play the ball well enough at this stage of his career, he's 30, to make the Bears' defensive secondary one of their strengths.
I also just think the veteran experience is nice to have when you remove Eddie Jackson from the puzzle. You know, you had that piece back there that we talked about, having that underrated presence of just being able to orchestrate back there, to keep things in line, to keep the communication sharp, to keep everyone kind of flowing the way they need to be flowing on the back end. So when you're adding a, longtime starter, a guy with a proven track record in the league, it helps you feel a little bit more settled as you go into this next wave. Now, look, like you're always looking to build out toward the future, and Kevin Byard signing comes in, and it just gives you that secondary now that you felt great about at the end of last year, and you feel great about going into 2024, that quintet. And if you want to make it a six-pack with Terrell Smith added in, you've got some guys back there, right? And some dogs and some competitors and guys that should make your defense really good on that level. Now fortify the front, feel good about your linebacking core. And I think, as you and I have talked about, the arrow is 100% pointing up for the Bears defense. It's just a matter of how steep that arrow is going to point up here by the time the offseason's over. But they're doing a lot of good things to position themselves for defensive success, which, oh, by the way, also helps a quarterback.
No doubt about that. Caleb Williams will be entering a situation conducive to winning and being able to, maybe where the complementary football thing really works and the defense helps the offenses and carries a young quarterback for a limited period of time. Okay, so everything is fluid. We understand that. But as we sit here right now on Monday afternoon, anything else that we need to address from the Bears' pursuit of a player, or maybe who they might have lost to somebody else?
No, just a couple little footnotes here from Monday afternoon. Well, number one, Chris Jones obviously breaks the bank with the deal in Kansas City. I think it was 5 years, $158 million in total, a ton of that guaranteed. I think 9 figures guaranteed in that deal. That was one where you go, wow, they really went out and made him the payday that they needed. Bilal Nichols signs in Arizona, understood to be 3 years, $21 million. That's a former Bears draft pick who gets another bite at the apple there. And so there's just a couple small notes here as we go forward. Obviously, before this episode's over, we'll talk about the quarterback landscape, so we'll save that for the end. But those are the notes right now. Again, as you mentioned, as everything is pretty fluid and these transactions are happening minute by minute by minute by minute.
I love the Bilal Nichols story. I love when he came to the Bears as a 5th rounder out of Delaware and all that he had to overcome.
You wrote a nice column when he got drafted, right?
Thank you for remembering that, Dan. Thank you. I remember that too. Yes, it was.
Yeah, it was
right
a good
when he got drafted. Thank you. So, all right, the next big story we need to address is the one that, as you say, threatens to be the headline of the offseason. Even though Caleb Williams will command most of the attention on the field, the Bears pivoting in the way that they did on Monday morning stole all of the attention and the headlines off the field. The Bears have now redirected their focus back to where they started, and it is back into the city of Chicago. We had the story this morning with other selected outlets. The Bears essentially had a orchestrated leak, I'd like to probably refer to it as, and there were some people who were privy to some of the details, and the biggest one is this. They are willing to commit $2 billion to their stadium project, and they want to stay in the city of Chicago. They want to stay on the museum campus. They plan to build, if everything goes according to plan, in the south lot where the Waldron deck is right now. They are going to demolish Soldier Field according to this plan, leave the colonnade standing, and maintain 20% of essentially green space, open space, and parkland so they can meet a certain standard and also a certain quota. This is a long way from being solved. We have to solve for X. It's an algebra problem. $2 billion plus X equals the stadium costs. What neighborhood are they shopping in? The SoFi district, which is $4.9 billion, or the Allegiant Stadium district, which is 1.9 in Vegas. There's a lot of gaps in between, a lot of unanswered questions, Dan, but the biggest one emphatically is the Bears would like to stay in the city, and the Bears feel like they belong in Chicago.
Are we in the trust tree here? Can I be honest?
Oh, there's nobody listening here, Dan, except for you and me and Studs.
Okay, good. Because my first reaction to all this on Monday morning, as I kind of digested all the details of all this, was, okay. And then just a flood of questions came to my head, which is where and how and with what money and when and how is this all going to get across the finish line sometime in the near future to the point where you're going to have a shovel in the ground somewhere that you want to have a shovel in the ground sooner rather than later. There was a lot of vagueness to what the Bears put out on Monday, and maybe you can help me sort through this because I just don't see a clear finish line with this current proposed plan, given the number of questions that would have to be answered with significant logistical challenges as to every layer of it. And oh, by the way, that doesn't even bring up the question of, okay, then what for Arlington Heights? You dumped $197 million into a property. I just have a difficult time believing in this current landscape of interest rates and everything else that you're just going to put a for sale sign out on, Euclid Road and say, oh, there it is. We've got a buyer. So there's just a lot here that
there is.
Gives me a lot of pause that the Bears have actual significant momentum toward the plan that they obviously pitched on Monday.
Well, look, this is not an advocacy broadcast. You know that. We're not trying to wave the flag for the Bears and say, okay, everybody get on board. This is the way it's going to go. I think it's significant. A couple things are bear remembering here. This is the first we've heard specifically how much the Bears want to essentially invest of their own McCaskey money, whether it's coming from PSLs, whether it's coming from their own inheritance, whether it's coming from their life savings. I don't know. $2 billion is $2 billion. So that is part of the equation. As I said, we don't know what the public subsidy part of the equation is. That would be X. We don't know how ambitious they want to be in terms of the scope of the building and the stadium. That would be Y, if you will. Yeah. There's a lot of unknowns here, but what we do know, I think, encourages some people, and maybe this is just one giant leverage play. I've been told that is not the case. Maybe I'm gullible in thinking that it isn't the case. Arlington Heights feels dead because of the insistence and the reluctance for anybody to come off of this property tax valuation impact or battle. And so there's an impasse. And the Bears are basically saying time is money, and it's going to take too long to sort this out. And the longer this goes on, now they're quibbling over what the land is worth without a structure on it. Eventually, they're going to quibble over what it's worth with a structure on it. And they're saying, well, I think we can get this done faster if we just stay in town. One more thing. There's an alliance between Kevin Warren and Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, that we referenced. There's unknown about what the way Governor Pritzker feels about that. We'll find out soon. This all is related to the lack of business development in the city of Chicago, which is why the Bears want to take advantage of that, and they think they can. They have legislative support to do so. It's why the White Sox are also looking at the 78 lot at Roosevelt and Clark in the South Loop to build there, a $9 billion investment by Related Midwest. When you look at what cities have to do these days to spark development in their cities post-COVID, this is two businesses, essentially the Bears and the White Sox, exploring ways to do that, and the city being very receptive to doing that. I'm not saying it's done. I'm not saying that you write a blank check or you just nod until you figure out what your tax bill is going to be. But it's worth listening because the Bears are very serious about making this happen.
So a couple other points from my perspective. Number one, one of the biggest attractive qualities of the Arlington Heights property was not only the footprint, but the fact that you could own that stadium and you could own that district and you could basically open up fire hydrants worth of money and it would just be gushing and you would have these revenue streams. I need to hear more specifics from the Bears leadership on how the profit generation and revenue generation plan will work if you have a stadium that's publicly owned and puts you in a situation where you're trying to do the math on that. There's a lot of algebra that has to go into that to make sure that that makes sense for you as a business, because the whole point is to kind of give yourself some of that momentum financially and as a business that helps your operation run smoother. There's also been these references to things that happened in Minneapolis when Kevin Warren was part of that stadium project way back in the day, where they had plans to go out to Arden Hills. I have a book sitting in my nightstand that I'm in the process of reading that details all of the obstacle course paths that the Vikings had to go down before they wound up in downtown Minneapolis. And one of them was this grand unveiling of this stadium and district in Arden Hills that ultimately, as you know, never came to be, because ultimately the city of Minneapolis said, well, we can't afford to lose this entity. And they fought, and now we've got a beautiful US Bank Stadium right down on the same footprint that the Metrodome was on in downtown Minneapolis. And so I say that because some people see that as, oh, okay, this is the Bears pivoting back to downtown like the Vikings pivoted back to downtown. I think it might be just the opposite. It might just be using this push in Chicago to get the people that are involved in negotiations in the suburbs to say, look, like, we can't afford to lose what was going to be for us another stream of revenue and opportunity and business development and growth. So why don't we go back to the negotiating table and try to bring them back to the land that they own, that they currently own, that they spent their time and money to tear down the grandstands and level to a point of getting there. It's just, I'm just left this feeling like we're kind of going in circles on this, and until I hear something a little more clear with less vagueness from the Bears, I don't know what to believe. But to your point, I had folks tell me recently that Arlington Heights is dead, and I just like it doesn't process in my brain until I can get the answers to some of these other questions that we're posing here. And obviously, as you know, it's going to take some time to get some of those.
It will. And I think those are good points and they're well taken. I just believe that this, to me, the biggest surprise of this development is that Arlington Heights looks like it's more remote than I ever thought it would be. I thought that was their plan all along, to build a stadium they could own and to print money that they could keep and make a profit because of it. I will now avoid predictions. I will avoid predictions because this is a fluid situation, as fluid as free agency. So that's the latest. There's a lot of developments. One of these days we'll have a pod just devoted to going through some of these historical references you cited in Minnesota, some other ones in LA and Vegas. And I think now we'll just kind of wait for the next step. We'll hear the comments. We'll be back later this week with whatever people have to say about what the latest is in this project.
But I think we were both sort of in that reaction when we understood that this thing was dropping on Monday morning, and you're just like, okay, so like things are getting real. And the expectation was they were going to get real at some point. Well, they're real now. And so now it's a matter of which direction they go. Yeah. And keep your pivot foot. That's the number one rule in basketball, right? Keep your pivot foot.
They were real enough to ruin my Sunday night, but that's another story. But, it's just like these things just seem to happen when you least expect it. So that was one thing to deal with on Sunday night and Monday morning, as was the press conference for Jaylon Johnson. Bears cornerback made his appearance in front of the media, came to town to sign the contract, presumably. Dan, you were there and you heard from Jaylon Johnson. What was your overall takeaway before we get to some of the things specifically that he had to say?
Look, you've heard me talk about Jaylon on this podcast before, and my affinity for his candidness, for his candor, for his ability to be very introspective and genuine in almost every single interaction that he has. It's nice when you're able to build up a relationship with a guy and then have him stick around into a second contract, and you can continue to kind of go on his journey with him. And Jaylon Johnson on Monday morning was more than willing to kind of cut open a vein and take the audience along on the journey that got him here to this extension, where he now has a 4-year deal with more than $50 million guaranteed, and he has generational wealth for his family, and he's been through so much to push himself to get to this point, and now has the thirst to continue doing it. And I just thought it was fascinating to be back in his presence when he had reached this one of his goals, and been able to check that box on his life goal checklist, and now has an opportunity to reset his focus going forward. The guy is an amazing talker. Again, really honest. And it was just, I think, emotional in some ways for Jaylon. And you could feel the gratitude that he had to kind of just describe it all, everything he's been through up to this point and everything that he's envisioning going forward.
Let's hear a little bit what he had to say.
I don't know if you heard my opening speech or not, but I mean, my dad always, he talking about self-motivation. So, I mean, things change. I mean, I walk on the field, I mean, every time, I mean, I used to think it was funny as a kid, but my dad used to go out and I used to watch him play like flag football, and he used to police Olympics type things. And he would just be talking to himself, and he'd be like, that dude over there think I'm soft, like he think I'm weak. And I'm like, Dad, what the hell are you talking about? And I used to ask him, like, Dad, why are you saying that? Like, did he really say that? He was like, I believe he did, but like, no, y'all laughing, but I mean, the mind is powerful. So it's like, anytime I go out there and I line up against a receiver, I line up against somebody, I really feel and believe that he don't think I'm good enough. So I think for me, when I go out there, I'm gonna punish you because I think I know what you're thinking. So I mean, just for me, that's kind of like the mental warfare that you gotta have to stay motivated. And I feel like even now, it's like people gonna see me and think they gonna earn a check off my name. So, I mean, for me, it's like, nah, that's never it. I feel like people still don't think I'm good enough. And I mean, sure, the way I see it, even the coaching staff, they still got to do a job. They got to replace me, and I'll be damned. So, I mean, for me, I still got a lot to prove, to myself, to any and everybody. So, I mean, it's not hard for me to stay motivated. I can find motivation in a lot of things.
David, one of the first things you ask when a player gets paid is, are they going to have the same hunger? Are they going to have the same drive once they've gotten that reward? I left Halas Hall today 175% convinced that Jaylon Johnson is going to be locked in for the duration of his time as a Chicago Bear. It's just the way he's wired. He's got that sort of competitive psychopath wiring deep inside his brain where you hear it. It's like, even if I have to make up things that I think other people are thinking about me to stay driven, I'm going to do it. And that obviously comes from his dad, as he described there, but you don't have any concerns if you're Ryan Poles. And I would imagine that's part of what makes you comfortable in giving a guy like that this type of reward and saying, hey, let's go, let's ride from here, and let's go check off some of those team boxes that we haven't been able to check off in your first 4 years.
In some ways, the pressure's off, and he can just apply it to himself and just, do what he's always done. And I think that he's not the guy you worry about getting paid and then tailing off. I think that he's the guy you may worry about staying healthy. That may be one thing, but I don't think you worry about his motivation level. What else did he say next that intrigued you?
Yeah, so this is one of those things where Jaylon in his opening statement talked about a lot of the people in his life. There was a whole array of family members there in the room with him, his girlfriend, his mother, his father, his brother, and uncle. And so he was thanking each of them for kind of their role in helping to shape who he is. But he also let us in on the revelation that he was seeing a therapist during the 2023 season for a sex addiction, which is one of the first times that I've ever sat in a press conference where a guy has openly thrown that out there in the middle of an acceptance press conference for his new contract. And so kind of a fascinating revelation. And then the press conference went on, and I think there were a lot of us in the room trying to think about, okay, how are we going to get back to this to get a little more detail on this? Kudos to John Greenberg of The Athletic for finally coming back to the question and sort of probing Jaylon on why he felt obligated or willing to offer that up. Here was a little bit of that exchange.
Jaylon, in your opening statement, you mentioned you saw a therapist last year.
Yeah.
Why was it so important, I guess, for you to share it right now? Does that kind of take a little bit of weight off your shoulders?
Yeah, a little bit. I think for me, though, it's bigger than me. I want to say, for one, it's because I know I'm not the only one going through it, for one. Two, it's okay to go through stuff. It's okay not to be perfect. I feel like people put us literally on this pedestal to get up here and talk and, oh, well, guys are this, guys are that. It's like, man, we human too. We go through things. Everybody goes through things. But I feel like people feel like you got to put a mask on. You got to cover it up. It's like, nah, like, it's okay to go through things. It's okay to seek help. It's okay to be vulnerable. And I feel like even through my journey with God, it's like his light shines when you're in the dark. But it's like when you're trying to be on the pedestal and you're trying to take all the glory and you're trying to pretend to be something that we, in a sense, you're not, then I feel like that's when you take away who God really is. And I feel like you gotta go low to really let God's work shine. And really that's when his miracles are done. That's when his work is done. So, I mean, for me to get up here and share it, I want people to get up and really share and get on their knees, be at God's feet to let him really shine in their life and help them in many ways that he's helped me.
Wow. I have not really heard of athlete since Brandon Marshall probably be that revealing. Certainly introspective. Good for him. You know, he's certainly in touch with his feelings. He's in touch with what works for him. He's talking openly about it. There's strength in his vulnerability. And but yeah, there's not any comparison, Dan. I can't really think of a comp with an athlete sitting up there and talking about such a thing.
You know, I think there's a reason that Jaylon is so well liked by the fans. Is certainly why he's a go-to guy of reporters in that locker room on a regular basis. It's his ability to be open, in this case, to be vulnerable, to share himself with us. I think like when you're able to create that connection with people by sharing yourself, it benefits you up the road. I mean, that was certainly a level of honesty that no one that walked into 1920 Football Drive this morning was expecting. And we went to a place with Jaylon, and kudos to him for being willing to take us there. He wasn't pushed on it. He wasn't probed on it. He offered that up willingly. And then obviously in that answer you just heard, gave you some things to think about. And so look, like, again, when it comes back to the football side of things, you've got a top tier cornerback who is now more than motivated to prove to the Bears that he's worth every penny that they paid him and more. He talked about the desire to get another bite at the apple before long, which obviously Ryan Poles structured the contract with Jaylon's agent, Chris Ellison, in a way that will allow him to get back to free agency before he turns 30. That's important. And so it's going to be really interesting to see which direction this goes in the next chapter of the Jaylon Johnson journey, but there's certainly going to be interesting along the way as you learn from that clip. And then finally, David, there is no Bears related Q&A that can occur these days without a question circling back to the quarterback situation. Jaylon Johnson has been one of the vocal proponents of Justin Fields, the current quarterback who's still under contract with the Chicago Bears as we speak here on Monday, March 11th. And he was asked, would there be any wariness inside the Bears locker room if Justin Fields were to be traded before the Bears held their next practice? And here's what Jaylon had to say on that.
You're one of a few current Bears who have said, been in favor of Justin Fields staying as a quarterback. If it turns out that he isn't and that the Bears go a different direction and draft a quarterback, do you think that'll be an issue in the locker room? Will that be anything that the Bears, Eberflus, Foles have to overcome and be wary of if they go with another quarterback?
Be wary of. I mean, I can't just say that. I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, we know the business that we're in. So I feel like it wouldn't be mature of us as a locker room not to rally together in spite of having Justin leave. I know what it would do to keep him here. I know how we would feel with him here. But I mean, I feel like just at the end of the day, we'll all have our opinions, our emotions. But as far as the locker room staying together, I think we have the right guys in the locker room to keep everything together, to keep us together. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're all here to win ball games. So I don't think it's about necessarily our feelings or, oh, well, you did this. I mean, we all here to win games. So whoever that Poles brings in, whoever the staff brings in to help us win games, that's what we're going to rock with.
Listen, cornerbacks know how to backpedal. I think he did that well. Went from being in full support of Justin Fields to understanding the realities in front of him. They're drafting Caleb Williams. Get used to it.
I also think that Jaylon understands now that he is taking on an elevated position of leadership in that locker room, and he's got to be one of those guys who leads with that maturity and that ability to reset the tone no matter when this move goes down. And so I think you heard the voice of a very respected player on that team saying, we're going to be fine. You know, will there be some hurt? Will there be some wistfulness if Justin's out the door? Absolutely. But we got a group here that was assembled for a reason, because there's been a priority put on character and maturity, and they're going to push that forward, and they're going to go try to win championships, which this team hasn't done in a long time. And yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure you're here, David. You host a morning talk show, 20 plus hours a week. The quicker that this quarterback situation reaches an end resolution, the better it is for the entire city of Chicago, because I think we've crossed over a path of exhaustion into an extreme fatigue where it's everybody's kind of just saying the same things over and over again until the sky turns purple.
Along those lines, you wonder about what's next and when they will trade Justin Fields, whether it will be this week or they'll have to wait till closer to the draft. When you see what's happened around the league, Dan, okay, Baker Mayfield, good money to stay in Tampa. Russell Wilson overnight tweeted that he's going to Pittsburgh, and that's a good move for the Steelers, I think. You look at Kirk Cousins, whether he ends up in Atlanta or not could dictate the future of Justin Fields. Mac Jones going from the Patriots to the Jaguars doesn't do a whole lot for me. I don't think it affects necessarily the quarterback market unless the Patriots get involved. All things considered, then, what does this mean for the timetable for Justin Fields and the Bears?
Well, as we're recording right now, it seems like Kirk Cousins to the Atlanta Falcons is a done deal, 4-year deal. And so you've got that domino to fall. And that was one.
I can't believe that. I can't believe that.
A lot of people were waiting on that. I think the Vikings played a game of chicken that they just lost. You know, they allowed Kirk to get to the open market, and he found someone that was willing to meet his demands. And now the Vikings are in a position where they're going to have to rapidly change directions and figure out what path they want to go down to at the most important position in sports. And so you now have this situation where that game of musical chairs is starting to sort itself out. Other quarterbacks still on the market, David, with veteran experience, starting experience, Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, Ryan Tannehill, Sam Darnold. There are options for people that want a quarterback. Where's Justin Fields going to land? Seattle? I don't know. You know, like, is he going to, it's hard to find a place that makes sense. People are going to continually link him to the Raiders because they're in quarterback need. We've talked about that ad nauseum on this podcast. I don't think Sean Payton and the Broncos are interested. There's a possibility here.
Vikings.
They're going to, I don't know that he fits in that offense, but if Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah feel like they reached a state of desperation after losing Kirk Cousins, maybe, but we're here. And, with the winds of change blowing across the NFL, Justin Fields' future is still kind of swirling up in the air like a leaf that blew off a tree.
And we'll be keeping track of every development as they happen. Remember that this week is fluid, and we'll be here for you when things happen. Today, to recap, DeAndre Swift is a Bear, the running back, $15 million guaranteed. Kevin Byard, the safety, is a Bear, signed on Sunday to join the secondary. We'll find out what's next. There could be moves overnight. When they happen, we'll come back and talk about them. And certainly if they trade Justin Fields, we'll be here for you as well. Anything else, Dan, before we wrap it up?
The unpredictability of this all is fascinating. I guarantee you that when we recorded our last episode late last week, we did not envision an episode that included all the topics that we just hit in the last 33 minutes. Insane, but welcome to the NFL.
Good stuff. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast. You can watch us on the 670 Scores YouTube page. You can download us on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Listen and subscribe. Review us. Let us know what you think. For Adam Sadzinski and Dan Wiederer, I'm David Haugh. Thanks for listening to the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.